Guys, with great power comes great responsibility. This is why I was in the Spider-Man movie, right? Spider-Man had great power, and he had a great responsibility to protect the citizens of New York City and also those around him. That means that what he said and what he did matters, because people looked up to Spider-Man to do the right thing and to lead. Now, the greatest athlete in the world right now, LeBron James, is wielding his great power irresponsibly. And this is why I have a series called LeBron James Exposed. You're watching part 2. You can watch part 1 in the description box, in which I hold LeBron James responsible for the great power that he has. But before we get into that, my name is Greg Foreman, and you're watching A Black Conservative Perspective. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my videos. And most importantly, share a black conservative perspective, aka a liberal's worst nightmare. Let's get it. All right, so LeBron James, he's been called out twice this week. First by Candace Owens, and then second by the LA Sheriff's Department in regards to his stance and his role in these protests and these police shootings and the things that are going on in this country, right? And they're both counter-related in a way. So I thought this was a good opportunity for me to talk about the power of rhetoric and specifically use LeBron James as an example for why his rhetoric is causing more harm than good. So let's start with Candace Owens. So Candace Owens went on Twitter and called LeBron James a pea brain and criticized LeBron James for his rhetoric in regards to making black people feel like they're being hunted down in the streets every single day by white people and police officers. Now, I don't think that Candace went about demonstrating her point in the most respectful way that's conducive to, you know, the conversation that needs to be had, but I think that her point is 100% correct, and I think that more people need to call LeBron James out on his irresponsible rhetoric, and I believe that Jason Whitlock has been an advocate of this as well. So I'm about to join in on the party. So like I said, Candace Owens is 100% correct, right? LeBron James does not realize the power of the tongue, right? LeBron James has millions and millions and millions of followers, a lot of young black and white and people of all races looking up to him for guidance and as a mentor and as somebody to model their lives after, right? And LeBron James has branded himself as the modern day Muhammad Ali, a freedom fighter, so to speak. I don't think LeBron realizes the consequences of that stuff, right? Because after the Ahmaud Arbery shooting, LeBron James went on Twitter and basically talked about how he feels like as black people, we go out and we get hunted every single day in the streets by white people and police officers, and that we can't even step outside and go for a jog and, you know, all this other stuff, right? That's incendiary. And what he fails to realize is that he is stoking the racial tensions in this country, and he's actually making the situation worse. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, LeBron is just a pawn of the Democrat Party and Nike and China. And my goal is to help LeBron James realize that what he's doing is counterproductive. Because if you go out and you tell black people they're being hunted in the streets by white people and police officers, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to be more hostile towards police officers, which is going to endanger more police officers. They're going to be more hostile towards white people, which is going to endanger more white people and put black people in danger. Because again, when you're more hostile towards somebody, that's how you escalate violence. That's how you escalate conflict. And when that conflict is escalated and being stroked by fear, that's when you have violence and destructions and protests in the street, which is what we're seeing right now, right? So yes, I think it's fair that LeBron James should take some responsibility for the things that are going on in today's society in terms of these protests and these riots and these small businesses being burned to the ground and the lives that are being lost, because he's put in the mind of millions of Americans that they're victims and that racism is the biggest problem ever, and that white people are bad and police officers are bad, while at the same time living in a mostly white neighborhood in Brentwood with half a dozen, if not dozens, of police officers and security surrounded by his house 24/7, right? It's very hypocritical to scare people and to believing that white people are the enemy when you're surrounded by them in your fancy neighborhood. And all it really is that these are just the elites of society and the establishment and the rich people, along with the Democrat Party, so to speak, with the racial part of it, inflaming racial tensions to advance their own political agendas. And LeBron James is just a pawn in that game because he's making money off this type of stuff, right? LeBron James, every time something happens, LeBron James goes out there, says inflammatory rhetoric, gets people riled up. Then you have protests in the streets. And then what happens is that Nike swoops in and starts to make a quick buck off of it by coming out with some social justice shirt, some slogan, putting it on a shirt. And then people buy and they sell it and they make money. And then LeBron James gets his check, right? That's the economic part of it. The political part of it is that LeBron doesn't realize he's tap dancing for the Democrat Party unknowingly, right? He's telling you to go out here and vote. They don't tell you who to vote for, but we all know it's implied who they're trying to vote for, who they want you to vote for. And he's playing this game where racism is brought to the forefront to cover up for the real issues that's going on in the black community, right? And we see it happening. And my example to prove this is that every single time one of these incidents happens, anytime you bring race into the conversation before actually really examining what happens, you automatically make it so that situation or problem will have no solution. Look at the Ahmaud Arbery situation, right? The focus of that should have been citizen arrest and the legality of that. That's what should have been the focus of the conversation. Because again, even in that situation, most people, whether left or right, could get behind the fact that they feel that those two guys were wrong for shooting Ahmaud Arbery like that, right? Most people could agree on that. But when LeBron James tweeted that out and he stoked those racial tensions, he eliminated all possibility of solving the actual real problem, right? Of preventing another Ahmaud Arbery from happening, right? Same thing with the Breonna Taylor thing. Breonna Taylor is a victim of bad luck and bad decisions. And what we really should be talking about is the constitutionality and the legality of no-knock warrants and related to illegal searches and seizures. That's what we should be talking about. What we should be talking about is the decision making that Breonna Taylor used in terms of who she chose to associate with in her life. That's what we should be talking about. But those are the things that we're not talking about, but instead we're talking about racism. Racism is a distraction from the real issues in the black community, the real issues and laws that may or may not need to be changed on the books. We can't ever have conversations about real issues as long as you keep putting race to the forefront of the conversation. And LeBron James is a participant in that because he benefits from that. Now, again, I don't know if LeBron James knows he's being used or whether these are his thoughts or not. Like I said, to me, when you're out here supporting the Democrat Party, but you claim you've read the Malcolm X book and you had great praise for Malcolm X, it doesn't make sense, right? Like, if anybody knows anything about Malcolm X, he was not a supporter of liberals in the Democrat Party. That being said, LeBron James is a pawn of the Democrat Party. And this is the Democrat Playbook 101. Make everybody think that racism is the biggest problem in their life and ignore the actual real issues in the black community. Fatherless households, mass incarceration, drug use, gang violence, and culture. Those are the real issues, but we can never focus on those issues as long as we keep putting racism and the white person at the forefront of our problems. And LeBron James's handlers, Nike and the Democrat Party, knows that. The survival of the Democrat Party is dependent on black people being dependent on them saying that the Republicans are racist and everybody else is racist. That's not them. So therefore you can't vote for them. And guess what? Race is the biggest issue in your life, guys. It's simple stuff. It's very simple stuff. It's a simple playbook that anybody can get. The second part of this is the LA Deputies office had called out LeBron James to match a bounty that they basically put over the head of the shooter of the two deputies that were, you know, just chilling in their car, and he came up to them and just opened fire on them. They put out a bounty on him. They put out a bounty on him, I think of $100,000, and they and then a private donation of I think $75,000 came in. So they're asking LeBron James to match that donation with $175,000 of his own. Now, I think this is an excellent political chess move from the LA Sheriff's Department. Congrats to whoever came up with this idea, because LeBron James is now in a pickle. He's in a position where you don't want to ignore this request because you live in LA, bro. You live in LA and you depend on these police and these public servants for your own protection and your own good. If for whatever reason you don't respond or you don't match this bounty, essentially what happens is that he may find himself in a situation where he has to 100% rely on private security because the public security is probably not going to be as keen to look out for you because apparently you don't want to look out for them. This is why LeBron James needs to be more thoughtful in his rhetoric and the things that he says and the things that he says he supports. Right? When you go out there, you support Black Lives Matter and they're telling people to defund the police, then by virtue of that, you support defunding the police. Right? And LeBron James, if you support defunding the police, then why do you have a dozen police officers and private security outside of your home at all times? It's the same question when it comes to the race question. If white people are so bad and you feel like you're being hunted in the street every time you go outside, then why do you live in an all-white neighborhood? Why? Go live in the hood. Go live in the hood. Go live among all black people if that's what really makes you feel safe. But again, that's why when people with critical thinking skills criticize LeBron James and say they can't take him seriously, that's the reason. Because you're saying things, but you're acting differently. You're supporting a group that says defund the police, but you rely on police for your protection. How does that work? Again, when you talk about defunding the police, you're going to hurt a lot more black people and impoverished people than you are yourself because you can afford to hire whatever police you want to hire. The things that LeBron James says don't negatively affect him, but they negatively affect the people that he say he's trying to help, and he doesn't even realize it. When you're getting behind a group like Black Lives Matter that's promoting the destruction of the nuclear family, then essentially what you're saying is that you're promoting black poverty. Because the solution of black poverty, the government program that needs to happen to eliminate black poverty, is not having a kid before you're 25, getting a high school education, and getting married. It's really simple. There's no other government program except that. I think the black poverty rate for married households is like 7.1% for black people in 2019. And I think it's like 30% for single mother households. So again, the solutions are there. But the Democrat Party has brainwashed LeBron so much that he doesn't want to focus on the real solutions. He wants to focus on getting people to vote Democrat as if voting Democrat is going to solve all your racial issues. It's not. It's not going to solve anything. Matter of fact, it's going to make them worse because they rely on these things happening to stay elected, to keep their jobs. They rely on it happening because they just turn around and blame racism. And in virtue, they say that the Republicans are racist, so therefore they're blaming Republicans. That's what's happening. We see it happening. That's why all these athletes are going out here telling you to vote and trying to get all these people registered to vote so they can try to get Trump out of office because they perceive that racism is the biggest problem in their life and Donald Trump is a racist. Even though I believe that Donald Trump would probably be the worst racist and white supremacist in history. But I do know who are the best white supremacists and racists in history, if that's a thing: the Democrat Party. Because if I was a racist or a white supremacist, you know what I would do? I would kneel with you. I would hold hands with you. I would sing Kumbaya. I would encourage you to go out here and protest and destroy your own communities. I would encourage you to not stand for the national anthem or take money out of the black millionaires' pockets. I would vote for a party that would keep you dependent on the government. Those are the things that I would do. And anytime something happens, I would blame racism. Because blaming racism helps take away from solving the real issues in the black community. That's what I would do if I was an actual white supremacist. That's what I would do. So I just think it's ironic how LeBron James goes out here and he tap dances for the Democrat Party, but yet claims that he's doing what's best for black people and that he's some type of freedom fighter when he's dropped the ball on China and then he's dropping the ball in his own community and he doesn't even know it. LeBron James has been pawned out by the Democrat Party, Nike, and China. And this is the result. This is what happens. That's my take on that. I think that LeBron James is in a peculiar situation where he needs to understand the power of his words, the power that he has, the power to actually make real change. It has to start with letting go of the Democrat Party. And it has to start with showing some consistency in terms of who and what you care about and doing what you have to do to bring justice for all, not just those who have taken away from our societies. So let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.